Good afternoon and welcome to those that have joined us so far. We're just going to give it about a minute past the hour and we'll get started around 2:01. So thanks for being here. We will get started shortly. Welcome if you're just joining. We're going to get started in just a moment. So we'll get started at 2:01 in about 30 seconds. All right, well, it looks like we're up to 60 and we are at 2:01, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Alex Hammis. I'm the campus technical trainer with Information Technology Services here at the University of Iowa. I do have a few of my colleagues with me today as well, Scott Sulzer, Austin Simmons, and Adrian Kuhn. They'll all be helping to answer questions in the chat. So if you do have questions during the presentation today, feel free to post those questions in the Q&A. I know I just said questions in the chat, so I probably already confused you, but the Q&A is enabled and there should be a message in the chat about the Q&A. So please use the Q&A for questions and we'll be helping to answer those questions as I go through the presentation. With that being said, I think that takes care of all of our housekeeping items. So let's go ahead and jump into the content for today. So first of all, welcome to ITS. Welcome to the University of Iowa. Our presentation today is just going to cover over kind of the essentials that your students need to know to get them acclimated and make the transition to technology at the University of Iowa as smooth as possible. So I wanted to start today with just a quick overview of some of the topics that we're going to cover. And the first bullet point actually is probably one of the most important things to take away from this presentation. So if you don't take away much, remember that we do have a walk-in location that's available for all of your students' IT needs. So if they want to come in, if they have questions about email, about any type of IT related question, as well as if they're having issues with their devices. So they can bring their laptops to our walk-in location. It's located in UCC, also known as or probably better known as the Old Capitol Mall. We're on the second floor on the south side of the UCC or the Old Capitol Mall. So this is a service I know I went to the University of Iowa way back when, and I didn't even realize that the walk-in location existed until I think my third or fourth year. So definitely make sure they're aware of that service that we provide because it's super helpful. Additionally, some other topics that we'll cover today. So we'll talk about Hawk IDs and account access. We'll go over email in the Microsoft 365 suite. We'll cover networking and computer labs. And then we also do have some frequently asked questions. So I'm not going to go through every FAQ that we get, but you'll have access to this slide deck after the presentation today. So it can serve as a great point of reference if you want to come back in a couple months and if you forget some of the topics that we covered. There's also some important links that we'll have on a slide at some point as well later on in the presentation. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into the actual content for today. So first things first, Hawk IDs and account access. So make sure your student knows how to change their Hawk ID password. So they can do that from the Hawk ID tools page that's listed on the slide. It's hawkid.uiowa.edu. It might be good if you just have them bookmark that page right away. That way they always know where to go to reset their password. A quick Google search of just like password reset uiowa will yield that same result too. So if they don't remember the exact URL, and they can also go to our website and we'll have information on that as well. So the biggest thing here is make sure that your students not using parent or guardian email addresses or phone numbers for their contact information in MyUI. The reason for that is if they use your information in MyUI, it could potentially block you from being able to create a guest account, which we'll talk about on the next slide. So make sure they're only using their contact information within MyUI. Now, when they're logging into University of Iowa services, they're going to log in with what's called their Hawk ID. So this is not their university ID number. It's a common point of confusion early on. So they will get an 8-digit university ID number that's on like their ID, But from a technology perspective, the one that they want to familiarize themselves more with is their Hawk ID. So the Hawk ID is going to usually be some form of their first initial and last name. For example, my Hawk ID is AHMMS. So whenever I'm logging into services, usually I'm logging in with AHMMS at uiowa.edu. And we'll talk more about the login process as we move through the slide deck. Now, just the last thing to note about Hawk ID and access is that students will gain access to most services after they enroll in classes. So really, once they register in a course, they'll get access to things like Icon and the other things that they need to do throughout their time at the University of Iowa. So, parent guest IDs. I know this is a hot topic, especially if you're the one footing the U-bill for your student. Sometimes, if you're paying the bill, you might want to see how grades are going. So your students do have the ability to send you a guest invitation. That way you can actually create your own account. And with this account, you'll actually get your own Hawk ID. It's what's called a guest Hawk ID account. And once they've created that account, or when they're creating that account, I should say, they'll have the option to choose what they share with you. So some examples are their U-bill, their grades, etc. So this is something that you could get set up as soon as they have their Hawk ID. That way you're, all squared away from that standpoint. Now, when it comes time for you to change your Hawk ID password, because remember, this is actually a separate account. So you'll have your own Hawk ID and your own Hawk ID password. You'll use the same tool. So the hawkid.uio.edu. Now, I know that you're only going to be logging into this periodically, so maybe once every 6 months, maybe once every year. So in the event that you forget your password or you don't know how to reset your password, feel free to reach out. You can contact the help desk. That's a common contact that we get, and we're happy to help you all get back into your guest accounts whenever the time comes. On the bottom of the slide, we do just have a link out to My UI. Again, that is where your students can set up their guest account. Two-step login. So it's important to note, first of all, two-step login is required. So if they don't set anything else up, make sure they set this up. And basically, you're going to have an app called the Duo mobile app in order to complete two-step authentication. So an app compatible device is required. And that could be any iPhone, any Android, pretty much any phone, any smartphone will work with the Duo mobile app. Now, in the scenario that your student loses their phone, has it stolen, or even if they just don't have a phone, we do offer hardware tokens. So that's kind of a workaround. If they were interested in hardware tokens, again, send them to the second floor on the south side of the Old Capitol Mall. That's our walk-in location, and we'd be happy to get them set up with one of those. Just want to reiterate again, two-step login is mandatory. There is a 30-day grace period for students, but honestly, have them set it up right away. It's much easier to not have to encounter that grace period and then have them not be able to access something that they need to access whenever that period comes to an end. So just like a lot of the other slides here that you'll see in the presentation, we do have instructions for how to set up Duo at the bottom of this slide. Okay, Icon. So I kind of already hinted at Icon, and you might have heard me say Icon, and you're like, what is that guy talking about? Well, Icon is the learning management system here at the University of Iowa. Icon is powered by Canvas. So if any of your students use Canvas in high school, I know there's a lot of Google high schools, or most high schools do their stuff with Google, but it's possible that maybe your student already used Canvas in high school if they were a Microsoft shop. Um, or excuse me, not a Microsoft shop, but yeah, I'm sorry, I'm off on a tangent, but it's possible that your student already used Canvas in high school. Canvas is used to share course content, submit assignments, take quizzes, grade, and hold online discussions. So pretty much every class at the University of Iowa will use Canvas. They might use it to varying levels, but whether it's virtual or in person, all classes use Canvas. Students gain access once admitted. So even though that they'll have access to Canvas, though, it's important to note that the instructors will be the ones who actually decide when to publish their courses in Icon. And I think I mentioned that I'm currently a student too, going for my master's. And in my experience, the teachers do a really good job about a week or two before the course, they publish the course in Icon, and you can view the syllabus and kind of view all of the associated information that you need to be able to access. So again, we have a link on the bottom of this slide that will take you out to the Icon dashboard where your students can check to see, if their classes have been published and those types of things. Okay, so that takes us through all of our like Hawk ID and account related things. We're going to move into email and Microsoft 365 next. So starting here with Microsoft 365, this is what I was getting at before. I got ahead of myself. I know a lot of schools might have been using Google in the high school world, but here at the University of Iowa, we're a Microsoft shop. So we use Microsoft 365. Your students will get online access to email, calendar, and documents anytime, anywhere. This allows them to collaborate with other students, work on project documents together, share documents, do everything that they need to do from a course perspective. Your students get 1 terabyte of online storage with OneDrive. If you're wondering what a terabyte is, it's a lot of storage. So I really don't see a scenario where your student would run out of storage, especially if they're really just using their OneDrive for all of their University of Iowa related coursework materials. Students keep access to their email account for 2 years after graduation. So this is important to note. Sometimes we'll have students like link their University of Iowa email to their LinkedIn account, for example, and they'll be job searching and using LinkedIn. And 2 years after they graduate, they'll lose access to that LinkedIn account because it's associated with their University of Iowa email. So that's something we definitely recommend using that sparingly as far as the University of Iowa email. Make sure that you don't tie it to any personal things that you're going to need to access to 5 years after graduation, for example. Now, it's really nice though, with the Microsoft 365 suite, you can download and install that on up to 5 devices. So maybe your student has a computer, maybe they have a laptop, some other type of device. They can download and install Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all of the apps in the Microsoft 365 suite on up to 5 devices. And to do that, what they'll do is just go to the link that you see on the bottom of this slide. So office365.uiowa.edu. And then on the top right corner of that screen, they should see an option that says install apps. And that's how they can actually install the apps right onto their device. Okay, so next topic is email. So sticking with the Microsoft 365 suite, the Outlook mobile app or the Outlook app is a part of the Microsoft 365 suite. So this is Microsoft's version of email. And it's important to note that the Outlook app is supported by the ITS help desk, whether that's the mobile app or the device or the app on you would have on a laptop. Now, with most mobile devices, there is an app called the Mail app. We don't recommend using the Mail app. It still works, but we recommend using the Outlook app because that's the one that's officially supported at the University of Iowa by the ITS Help Desk. So if they're using, for example, the built-in Mail app on iOS, we don't support that. We can provide best effort, but we really recommend that they're logging into the Outlook app. And to log into the Outlook app, just like a lot of other University of Iowa services, they'll log in with their Hawk ID at uiowa.edu and then their Hawk ID password. And sticking with the theme, we do have a support article on the bottom of this slide that talks more about that process if you need to access that later on. Okay, next topic is AI. I know that this is another hot topic in the higher ed world right now. So your students will get access to what's called Copilot Chat. So it's essentially Microsoft's version of ChatGPT. This allows them, to use the AI tool, throughout their time at the University of Iowa. Now, it's important to know as far as like AI and courses and when can I use AI, when can I not use AI, that comes down to the instructor. So to go back to my experience as a student, usually when I'm doing a new course, this syllabus will have instructions on how AI can be used in that course or if it can be used at all. So as far as, using AI to do their homework and things like that, that's a course by course basis and that's determined by the instructor. We don't necessarily have best practices that we can give from an IT standpoint, other than letting you all know that they do have access to Copilot Chat. Okay, so That takes care of email and Microsoft 365. We're going to move on to networking and computer labs next. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about wireless networks on campus. So there's three different networks on campus. There's Eduroam, UI Guest, and UI DeviceNet. And the biggest takeaway is that Eduroam is the recommended network that your students should be using anytime they're doing their schoolwork or trying to access University of Iowa services. Eduroam is the secure, high-speed wireless on campus, and they'll log into it with their Hawk ID at uiowa.edu and their Hawk ID password, just like they do with a lot of other University of Iowa services. Now, there is another network called UI Guest. The takeaway is don't have your students use UI Guest. And the reason is there's a lot of services that aren't even accessible on UI Guest. UI Guest is just like the name allowed or sign, just like the name suggests. It's designed for guests. So if your students are actually doing their homework or accessing University of Iowa services, make sure that they're using Eduroam. Now, the bottom one on the screen is probably the one that your students are most concerned about, UI DeviceNet. This is designed for gaming consoles and smart TVs. So whenever the time comes in August and your students are moving into their dorm rooms, they're probably going to want to have all their streaming services and their gaming consoles set up. So we actually have a support article linked on this slide where UI DeviceNet is highlighted in blue. If you click on that support article, that'll take you out to the website that has instructions. This is also a common contact that we get at the help desk in August. So at the risk of sending more people to the help desk, I am going to say that you can reach out to them and they're happy to help you, with all of those devices and getting those configured whenever the time comes for your student to move in. Okay, so instructional technology centers. So there is over 1,000 computers available across campus. So again, if your student has some type of issue with their device, they do have access to these other computers. I know, again, when I was a student, it's been a while, but I use these all the time. And it's really nice to have printers in all of the locations of the computer labs. How it works is each black and white page is 7 cents and each color page is 20 cents, and those charges are automatically charged to the U-bill based upon usage. And several of these locations are open 24 hours, so I'm not necessarily advocating for all-nighters, but I know I had a few times in my undergrad where, I had to get it done. So going at 4 in the morning and having somewhere to go to print stuff off or do what I needed to do was really nice from that standpoint. Okay, so now we're going to move into the FAQs. And really, the biggest question that I'm sure a lot of you have is laptop recommendations. So, we do recommend that your student has access to a laptop or desktop computer throughout their time at the University of Iowa. Now, the biggest thing here to know is that Chromebooks are not recommended as your only device. The reason for that is they do not work with some university services. So, we're like I mentioned earlier, we're a Microsoft shop. We use the Microsoft 365 suite. And I know, for example, some of those Microsoft 365 apps can be a challenge to run on a Chromebook. And there's also other services that it gets a little hairy when all you have is a Chromebook. So the biggest takeaway is it doesn't matter if it's a Mac or a Windows, just make sure it's not a Chromebook. Now, for guidance on hardware minimum specifications, we do have a recommendations page, so feel free to reference that. And then I do just want to mention if your student's an engineering student or a business student, they do have more specific recommendations just because of the type of work that they're doing, like high performance computing and things like that. So feel free to check out those specific recommendations if they're in the business or the engineering school. All right, so after that, we just have a couple slides of FAQs. Like I said, you can reference these slides after the presentation, and we do have some helpful links in this slide deck as well. Kind of just a long list of different tools that your students might want to get themselves acquainted to. Now, I just wanted to really wrap up and just go over the key takeaways from this presentation. So just a reminder, we have our walk-in location on the second floor of the Old Capitol Mall. I know I've said that like 6 times now, but use that to your advantage. I think it's really helpful to have that in-person support, especially if you're having something wrong with your computer or laptop, just take it to us and let the experts handle it. Now, we don't handle every type of issue. Like if it's a hardware issue with your computer, that's not something we necessarily handle. We do have recommended shops in the area that you could take your device to. But if it's just something like software related, or if something isn't loading or they're stuck on some type of screen, we can definitely try to reformat the device and kind of get it back to square one from that standpoint. We make sure your students understand their Hawk ID accounts and their access, and when they get access to their different services, remember to make sure that they're logging in with their Hawk ID at uiowa.edu and their Hawk ID password to most services. Make sure that you get the Microsoft 365 suite installed on any of their devices that they want. They can have that on up to 5 devices. And then make sure they're familiar with the networking and the computer labs. Make sure they're using Eduroam as their preferred network. And like I said, we have our contact information on this slide, some common questions and links as well. So with that said, that is everything that I had for the presentation today. We're happy to hang out here and answer any questions if you have them. But that's everything that I have. Okay, perfect. Let me just take a look at the Q&A to see what we have. Looks like we do have some questions that did come into the Q&A. It looks like 7 of the 9 have been answered. So there is a Q&A tab from the menu in the Zoom meeting. So if you're curious about some of those questions, I think we have people working on to answer the ones that are open still. But what I might do is just go through a few of the answered questions while we're waiting here, just to kind of make sure everyone can see it. So Sherry asked, is this presentation going to be available on the YouTube channel later today? And Orientation Services said it will be available on the YouTube channel, but I'm not sure the exact date. I would assume by next week. We take time to caption the webinars so they're accessible to everyone. So probably sometime next week, you'll be able to access the presentation. Haley asked, will we be logging into Canvas with our UIowa email or with a personal email? I already have an account for Canvas with my personal email from the Iowa Young Writers Workshop virtual courses I took in high school, and was wondering if I'd still use that or switch to one with my UIowa email. So Scott says logging into Canvas will be done via your Hawk ID username. Typically, a new account will be created in Icon or Canvas upon enrollment utilizing your Hawk ID information. If you did happen to have a Hawk ID username from your time in the Iowa Young Writers Workshop, then that will be the Hawk ID username you use. Do you want me to continue to go through these questions? I guess I'm asking this to the orientation services. Is this helpful?
That is up to you. You can choose to go through the answered ones or the open ones, which are the ones that have not been answered. That is your choice.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just continue to go through the answered ones just because I think my colleagues are helping to answer the open ones. But we have an anonymous question for an incoming freshman wanting to purchase a new laptop. What does the university recommend? Does the university partner with any vendors that maybe provide to students or incoming freshmen? So hopefully you got the answer to this question. I think I covered it after you asked that question. But again, the biggest recommendation, it doesn't matter if it's Mac or Windows, just make sure it's not a Chromebook, to be honest with you. The Iowa Hawk Shop does have some discounted pricing, it looks like. So Scott's linked that as an answer to that question. Okay, next question. Where can I find the link for the recommendations for laptops from Tippy? Scott shared that link. That link is also in this slide deck. So if we go back here to the recommended laptop, you'll see it down here at the bottom for the business school specifically. Continuing on, will this presentation be shared with us? So just like the question at the top about this, you will have access to this presentation. So this is being recorded, and they're going to share it out on the orientation website with everyone. All right, so we got another question about recommended laptops specifically for pre-med students. So it looked like Austin took care of that one. We don't really have any specific laptop recommendations for pre-med students, but we do have some other suggestions on that support article. I'm just going to kind of skim through the rest of the questions to see if it's anything else that needs to be covered. So, is Microsoft 365 provided through the university available to the student even when they're off campus, like when they're home for break? Yes. So they'll have access to it year round. So as long as they have an internet connection, they can access the Microsoft 365 suite and do everything that they need to do on up to 5 devices. Let me just continue to skim to see if any of these other questions need to be discussed. So I had a question about printers. I briefly saw that we don't need to bring our own printers as printers are supplied around campus, but we are allowed to bring our own printers to use in the dorm. That's correct. You are allowed to use your own printer into the dorms, but they won't be able to connect to the university's wireless network. So consider that. Honestly, I think a lot of the time using the printers around campus might be the easiest scenario in that situation. Looks like we have more just laptop recommendation questions that got answered. We have a question about Gmail. So definitely do not recommend using Gmail. It's not supported by the ITS help desk. Just to reiterate, we are a Microsoft shop. So Outlook would be the only supported email service by the ITS help desk. All right, we have a question. Which level of knowledge of Microsoft 365 apps, for example, Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, should a new student have? Scott's recommendation, I think, is correct. He said, we always recommend ensuring access to email first and foremost, making sure that, the Outlook app is installed on their phones, tablets, computer, and knowing how to access their email. I think they'll gain familiarity with Word, Excel, and like the other apps throughout their time just doing their coursework at the university. But from an IT perspective, Outlook definitely first and foremost. Make sure that they understand how to access Outlook, how to access their emails, and all of that jazz. Okay, so I think we just got another question about Microsoft 365, and that one's taken care of. Just a reminder, if you join late, your students do have the capabilities to download and install Microsoft 365 on up to 5 different devices. And I think what I might do here is actually just open up the link and do a quick demonstration on how to install that. So let me just stop my share and reshare. So from that office365.uiowa.edu landing page up here on the top right corner, if they go to this install apps option, then they can just choose the Microsoft 365 apps and get those installed on their devices. Another question just came in. It looks like Austin's answering it, but I guess I'll just cover it too. The question was, what version of Copilot do students have access to? So that's going to be the Copilot chat version. So it's not the Microsoft 365 Copilot, which goes through all of your documents and like Microsoft 365 stuff. The Copilot chat is just kind of like ChatGPT, if you're familiar with that, where you can have conversations, you can, ask questions to the AI. But if you're looking for more advanced, like letting the AI go through your documents and all your other stuff, really just the Copilot chat is the only one available to students. And Austin put a link with a guide to that in the chat as well. Thank you, Austin. Okay, well, we're happy to hang out here and continue to answer questions for anyone that has them. It looks like every open question has been answered at this moment. I'm just going to pull up the ITS Help Desk contact information again. Just do that here on the screen for everyone. Yeah, I think we might be good to end. We don't have any questions coming into the chat. So if it's okay with orientation services, I think we can probably wrap it up.
Thank you so much for attending, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.